Hello everyone, and welcome back to Isaiah from Mormons. Today we're going to be doing Isaiah 40. Time for something completely different. We did 36 through 39, the historical section. It was completely different from everything else we've done so far, and now we're jumping back to the speeches that Isaiah is giving. Like I said, 35 interrupts you almost in the middle of a speech, so I wanted to give you a rundown of the entire speech. It goes from 34 all the way to a couple verses into 42. So I don't want you to lose continuity of the speech. That's one of the big things I've been trying to focus on, is that Isaiah's speeches have continuity. You can break the book into sections, and probably should, and read the speeches together so you can make sense of his rhetoric and what he's trying to say. So I'm going to just give you the rundown of 34 and 35 and get you into 40 so you can sort of hit 40, hit the ground running with 40 and make some sense of it. So he starts off by calling heaven and earth to witness in 34. And he says that the indignation of the Lord is upon all the nations. All these terrible things are going to happen to the nations because God is going to go out and he's going to punish them. And it's going to be completely desolate. Only wild animals are going to inhabit these cities. But someday, what has been desolated within Israel and Judah is going to grow up again. So then he says, strengthen ye the weak hands and confirm the feeble knees. Be brave, in other words. I know that the war is coming, but he says, say to them that are of a fearful heart, be strong, fear not. Behold, your God will come with vengeance, even God with a recompense. He will come and save you. He says all these great miraculous things are going to happen, and you guys are going to be okay. Even the desert is going to become green again. Everything's going to be all right. There's going to be this holy way leading up to the temple. And we're about to get to this again in this next speech, so it's important. So he says, and a highway shall be there, and a way, and it shall be called the way of holiness. The unclean shall not pass over it, but it shall be for those, the wayfaring men, though fools, shall not err therein. So anybody, like I said before, no matter if people usually do it wrong, do things wrong, even an idiot can do this. It's going to be very easy to do. No lion shall be there, nor any ravenous beast shall go up thereon. It shall not be found there, but the redeemed shall walk there. And the ransomed of the Lord shall return, and come to Zion with songs and everlasting joy upon their heads. They shall obtain joy and gladness, and sorrow and sighing shall flee away. This sounds all kinds of return out of exile. That's what it seems like. And that's, I think, exactly what he's saying. All these people have been taken prisoner by the Assyrians, and he's saying God's going to make this path, and along this path he's going to go out to destroy Israel's enemies, and he's going to send refugees back along the path up to the temple. The ransomed of the Lord shall return. Sorrow and sighing shall flee away. So comfort ye my people, saith your God. It works perfectly. That I just read you the end of 35 and the beginning of 40. So let me read you just a little bit of 35 and 40 the way it probably should have been. The ransomed of the Lord shall return and come to Zion with songs and everlasting joy upon their heads. They shall obtain joy and gladness, and sorrow and sighing shall flee away. So comfort ye my people, saith your God. Speak ye comfortably to Jerusalem, and cry unto her that her warfare is accomplished, her iniquity is pardoned, for she hath received of the Lord's hand double for all her sins. So we see this very perfectly, just right on through. There really, like I said, there probably should not have been a break there. It should have just kept right on going. It makes perfect sense as it is. So why? Why did somebody insert this historical section? It was nice. It was nice to get the rundown and know what was going on. But let me tell you why I think somebody put it in. It comes from people later on misunderstanding the older Hebrew. We've talked about this before in connection to the Book of Mormon. And I think that's exactly what we see here. Your warfare is accomplished. That word may not be taken literally, perhaps, right here to mean that the war is over. So people were probably reading through this speech, and then they said, oh, comfort ye, my people, saith your God. Speak ye comfortably to Jerusalem, crying to her, her warfare is accomplished. That means the war is over. Well, what war is over now? It's got to be this war against the Assyrians. So they insert that section, the historical section, right there in the middle, so that that comment makes sense. Well, that's great and everything, and they needed to do it somewhere, right? I think they were maybe concerned that people would not have this historical context, and they wanted it to be in the book. So they said, we got to stick it somewhere, let's stick it here. So in a funny, late Jewish sense, from the Persian period, this makes all kinds of sense, right? Late Persian period even. This makes all kinds of sense her warfare is accomplished. This warfare has to be talking about that, so let's stick it in. Well, I doubt very much that that's how it was supposed to be and how it was even meant. This is probably him, part of the speech. He's saying, the redeemed are going to come back, sorrow and sighing shall flee away, so comfort ye, my people, saith your God. Speak ye comfortably to Jerusalem, and crying to her that her term of service is over. Or you might say, today her enlistment is up. Her iniquity is pardoned. She's received of the Lord's hand double for all her sins. In other words, your enlistment is over. You're just about to be done with all your wars. Why? Because Jehovah's going to fight for you, and he's going to fight your battles for you, and you're going to be victorious. So this speech is given right before the events that we're seeing in the historical section. The people have repented. Isaiah is coming out and saying to them, listen guys, you've repented now. God's going to go out and fight your battles for you. You are going to be okay. And it's like Jerusalem's enlistment is up. It's not going to have to be in the army anymore. There's going to be no more fighting for Jerusalem. God is about to save you. Now, this would be oddly obvious if he says, well, looks like the war's over. You're like, well, yes, the war's over, right? Why are you bringing this up? But if he's talking about the war is over, as in your enlistment is up, right before it's over, this is an expression of confidence in God, that Jerusalem's enlistment is as good as up. You're not going to have to fight anymore. So, with that in mind, I think it all starts to come together and make sense. We're talking about this holy path, this way of holiness leading up to the temple and leading out from the temple, and he's continuing to talk about that right here. So with that in mind, let's just jump right into Isaiah 40, 1 and 2. We've already talked a little bit about it, but let's just jump in and talk about it in detail. So, comfort ye, my people, saith your God. Speak ye comfortably to Jerusalem, and cry unto her that her warfare is accomplished, that her iniquity is pardoned, for she hath received of the Lord's hand double for all her sins. The voice of him that crieth in the wilderness, prepare ye the way of the Lord, make straight in the desert a highway for our God. Every valley shall be exalted, and every mountain and hill shall be made low. The crooked shall be made straight, and the rough places plain. And the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together, for the mouth of the Lord hath spoken it. So here, like I said, there's all kinds of continuity. God is going to make sure sorrow and sighing shall flee away. So, comfort ye, my people, saith your God. Presumably God is talking to Isaiah and saying, comfort my people so that they are not afraid. I know they have good reason to be afraid. The Assyrians are coming, but comfort them. Speak ye comfortably to Jerusalem. That really is literally speak to the heart of Jerusalem in Hebrew. And cry to her that her term of service is over. Her term of service in the military is over. Her iniquity is pardoned. Presumably, like I said, somewhere before 34, they've repented. Now Isaiah says, finally, you've repented. Your iniquity is pardoned. You've received quite enough punishment from the Lord for all your sins. She's, in fact, received double for all her sins by the Assyrians coming in and taking out most of the countryside. But now you've repented. So, we're going to go back to the theme we were just barely talking about in 40, the voice of him that crieth. By the way, it's hard to know how to read this. The Book of Mormon is not that helpful because it also could be read the same way. The Septuagint is similarly unhelpful. It could be the voice of him that cries, and the person crying is in the wilderness. But it doesn't seem like the proper parallelism to me, it seems like a good old-fashioned Isaiah parallelism that says, the voice of the crier, colon, in the wilderness prepare the way of the Lord. In the desert make straight a highway for our God. So the voice says this parallelism. So that makes a lot more sense to me. Now, you can read it as crying in the wilderness. John the Baptist did, and that's great. But remember, John the Baptist is a prophet. He can reinterpret Scripture to match his own time period. Who knows if that's actually what Isaiah meant or not. To me, it seems like Isaiah may have just been using another classic Isaiah parallelism. The voice of the crier, colon, in the wilderness prepare the way of the Lord, in the desert make straight a highway for our God. That's how it reads in Hebrew. And this, though, is beautifully profound. This voice is coming and saying, make a road that goes through the desert. Why would you have a road through the desert, presumably from Jerusalem? So that God could come out of the temple, make a straight shot towards the Assyrian capital out through the desert, and destroy the Assyrians while they are down in Judah. I think that's the idea, that Jehovah is going to make a straight shot for the main homeland of Ashur, and he's going to kill Ashur in his bed, as it were, and everything's going to be okay. I think that that's what we're seeing here. So it says, prepare the way of the Lord. This is what you would do for kings. When kings came into town, you would make a road for them. You would literally create roads before the king so that he could drive his chariot, because it was very difficult to drive chariots through all kinds of crazy terrain. So it was your job to make a level path for the chariot to go on. But he is going through some very difficult terrain. The terrain outside Jerusalem is crazy. If you're going to actually make a straight shot towards the Assyrian capital, it would have been very, very difficult. You would have had to go straight through the desert, through this kind of crazy valley, the valley where the Dead Sea is, right there, the Judean wilderness. It's all kind of crazy road. And there's no water there. That's why the Assyrians make this kind of crazy north and then south loop down, because they have to stay near water sources. But Jehovah has no such restriction. So he says, make a road straight through the desert. I'm not dealing with the old roads. I'm making a new road, and I'm going straight for the Assyrian capital. Me and Ashur have some unsettled business. And so that's, I think, is exactly what he's doing right now. Is he's making the straight shot to go take out Ashur. So they say, every valley shall be exalted. The valleys will be lifted up to make this perfectly level road. Every mountain will be brought down to make this perfectly level road. The crooked shall be made straight. The wandering roads will be made straight. And the rough places plain. All the rocks will be smoothed down. So everything is going to be a perfect road for God, presumably straight to Assyria. And the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. For the mouth of the Lord has spoken it. Now this statement, the mouth of the Lord has spoken it, and what has he spoken? He's spoken that everyone's going to see him do this, take on Ashur. That's the implication here, and it's going to show up throughout this chapter. So the glory of the Lord shall be revealed. Presumably this means his amazing ability to fight is going to demonstrate that he is the best. He's going to take on Ashur and win. And all flesh will see it together. Everyone in the world is going to see what's going to happen. How do you know? Because God has said it's going to happen. So then we get this. The voice said, cry. And he said, what shall I cry? All flesh is grass, and all the goodliness thereof is as the flower of the field. The grass withereth, the flower fadeth, because the Spirit of the Lord bloweth upon it. Surely the people is grass. The grass withereth, the flower fadeth, but the word of our God shall stand forever. So the voice, once again, the voice of the crier, in the wilderness prepare ye the way of the Lord, right? So here he says, the voice said, so once again it's the same thing, the voice said, cry, and he said, what shall I cry? Interestingly, this is almost exactly how the encounter between Muhammad and Gabriel appears in the Quran, or in the material describing this also in the Hadith. This is what we see. So, kind of an interesting parallel. As a voice said, cry, and he said, what shall I cry? All flesh is grass. and all the goodliness thereof is as the flower of the field. Now, goodliness there is because of probably a very old use of the word that we would probably today translate as grace. That's how the New Testament authors appear to reappropriate it, and that's how the Book of Mormon authors seem to use this word. That reflects a lot of odd study I've done for many years, but just go with me on this. Goodliness there is probably, it's like I said, related to the word for grace, but it's supposed to probably at this point mean permanence. So at this stage, probably pretty early stage of the language, it's another point that shows that perhaps Isaiah, this part of Isaiah, is a little older than people think. That probably would have meant permanence. So the voice said, cry, and he said, what shall I cry? All flesh is grass, and all the permanence thereof is as the flower of the field. So when it says all flesh, that's an older phrase from the law of Moses that implies everybody on the earth. From one of the older parts of the editing process of the law of Moses, it seems, actually. So all flesh, everyone on the earth, is just like grass. Their permanence, they're just about as permanent as the flower in the field. How permanent is that? Well, not very. The grass withereth, the flower fadeth, because the Spirit of the Lord bloweth upon it. Surely the people is grass. So, in other words, there is no permanence. People are going to start to die just like grass in the field. Why? Because the Spirit of the Lord is going to blow upon it. Now, this is a pun. Spirit and wind are the same word in Hebrew. So the wind of God is going to blow upon the people of the world, and they're going to die because the people are just like grass. So he says, the grass withereth, the flower fadeth, but the word of our God shall stand forever. What is this word? Well, it's God's glory is going to be revealed, and everybody's going to see it. So he's saying, what God has said, he's going to go out and presumably deal with Ashur, the god of the Assyrians. That's going to stand forever. But the people are going to be destroyed. And what people is he talking about? Well, he's talking about the Assyrians. The Assyrian army coming up on Jerusalem at a pretty good clip at this point. God says these guys are going to fade away like grass blown by a hot wind on a summer day. Why? Because what I say always lasts, and I'm saying the Assyrians are not going to survive this. So, then we get this. O Zion that bringeth good tidings, get thee up into the high mountain, O Jerusalem that bringest good tidings. Lift up thy voice with strength, lift it up, be not afraid. Say unto the cities of Judah, behold your God. Behold, the Lord God will come with a strong hand, and his arm shall rule for him. Behold, his reward is with him, and his work before him. He shall feed his flock like a shepherd. He shall gather his lambs with his arm, and carry them in his bosom, and shall gently lead those that are with young. He says, Zion, that bringest good tidings. Presumably because from Zion, they're going to hear about this good news that God has destroyed the Assyrians. So he says, get thee up into the high mountain, O Jerusalem. So Jerusalem's being personified here as the one that's bringing this good news. So he's supposed to go up to the high mountain to proclaim this, to send this message. Thou that bringest good tidings, lift up thy voice with strength. Lift it up, be not afraid. Say unto the cities of Judah, behold your God. So it's almost like Jerusalem was supposed to get up even before God has come to kill the Assyrians and say to everyone, God is going to look at God. God is going to do this. He's going to save you. Behold your God. Don't be afraid. So I says, say unto the cities of Judah. The other cities of Judah are thinking, God's abandoned us. The Assyrians have won. Ashur is clearly better than Jehovah. He's taken out all of Judea. This means the Assyrians are the best. That means Ashur is the best. And God says, no. Behold your God. Behold, the Lord your God will come with strong hand, and his arm shall rule for him. Behold, his reward is with him, and his work before him. They will see God coming with his strength, and his arm, the power of his arm, presumably his sword arm, is going to rule for him. In other words, he's going to destroy Judah's enemies. And then he's going to take the spoil. Behold, his reward is with him. The spoil he's taking, and his work before him. So presumably this implies he is going to take the spoil. His work before him. He knows exactly what he needs to do, and he knows exactly what he's going to get. He shall feed his flock like a shepherd. He shall gather the lambs with his arm and carry them in his bosom. He shall gently lead those that are with young. So just like a shepherd takes care of and feeds his flock as they're going from one place to the other, and the ones that are too small to go on their own, he says he gathers the lambs with his arm. He picks them up and carries them along, carries them in his own bosom, and shall gently lead those that are with young, those that are about to give birth, presumably, those that can't go very far very quickly. He says he's going to lead them back. All the people that have been taken as slaves into Assyria, he's going to lead back. Who hath measured the waters in the hollow of his hand, and meted out heaven with a span, and comprehended the dust of the earth in a measure, and weighed the mountains in scales, and the hills in a balance? Who hath directed the Spirit of the Lord, or being his counselor hath taught him? With whom took he counsel, and who instructed him, and taught him in the path of judgment, and taught him knowledge, and showed to him the way of understanding? Behold, the nations are as a drop of the bucket, and are counted as the small dust of the balance. Behold, he taketh up the isles as a very little thing. And Lebanon is not sufficient to burn, nor the beasts thereof sufficient for a burnt offering. All nations before him are as nothing. They are counted to him less than nothing, and vanity. So he says, God has measured the waters of the earth in the hollow of his hand. God is an amazing giant cosmic being. He measured out the heavens with a span, presumably once again the span of his hand. He comprehended, he picked up the whole dust of the earth in his measuring cup. He's weighed the mountains in scales, and weighed the hills in a balance, another way of measuring weights and sizes. To God, it's such a cosmic being. He's over the entire earth. This is one thing that's difficult for people to grasp. They feel like deities are regional deities. And Isaiah has beaten this horse way past dead. There are no such things as regional deities, and he's going to continue to make this point. Jehovah is the God of the whole earth that makes him better than all other gods. And he's even going to start to make the point, even stronger than he's made it in the past, that these other gods are not actually gods. And he's going to specifically say, to whom will ye liken God? Because that's probably what people are thinking, that Ashur and Jehovah are equals. Jehovah has fought Ashur to a standstill, which means he's not better than Ashur. It means they're equal. That Jehovah simply has the home court advantage because they're fighting in Judah right now. Isaiah is going to say, no, that's not the case. So he says, who hath directed the Spirit of the Lord, or being his counselor, hath taught him? Who's told God how to make the world and to do all these things? Nobody, of course. With whom took he counsel, and who instructed him, taught him in the path of judgment, and taught him knowledge, and showed to him the way of understanding? These things that he's saying now are things that counselors would often do with kings. So he's saying, who is he even like a king that he has these counselors surrounded around him to teach him these things? Well, no, he doesn't. Behold, the nations are as a drop of the bucket. And you might say the Gentiles are like a drop in a bucket, and are counted as the small dust of the balance. Presumably just a little tiny bit of dust left on a balance after you measure something that you don't even need to wipe out to re-zero the balance. That's how insignificant the Gentiles are to God. Behold, he taketh up the isles as a very little thing. Presumably this means that he views all the countries to be basically insignificant. He taketh up the isles as a very little thing. Isles can mean islands, it can just mean dry land. So all of the dry land of the earth, just all the countries of the world, are just insignificant to him. And Lebanon is not sufficient to burn, nor the beasts thereof sufficient for a burnt offering. Lebanon is up north of Israel. It has these giant forest areas with all these wild animals, and he says not even that would be sufficient for an offering to this cosmic deity. All nations before him are as nothing. They are counted to him less than nothing, and vanity. All the Gentiles, all nations, Gentiles can can be read there as well. Before him are nothing. They're, in fact, worse than nothing. They're worthless. God doesn't care about that at all. Now, we know that you have to read this in the context. We know that God does care about the Gentiles. He's talked about that over and over again in Isaiah. In fact, he wants the Gentiles to be all part of one big happy Jehovah family. But he's not really talking about that right now. The idea is he's not afraid of them. If God wanted to obliterate them all for Israel's sake, it wouldn't be a big deal. He doesn't want to, but it wouldn't be an issue for him. So that's when we get this. He's been leading up to this whole time, really for the whole book, and then he starts to hit his point a little bit harder, I think, because it feels like he needs to, because of the issues with the Assyrian god Ashur, who we've been talking about quite a bit. To whom then will ye liken God, or what likeness will ye compare unto him? The workman melteth a graven image, and the goldsmith spreadeth it over with gold, and casteth silver chains. He that so impoverished that he hath no oblation chooseth a tree that will not rot. He seeketh unto him a cunning workman to prepare a graven image that shall not be moved. Have ye not known? Have ye not heard? Has it not been told you from the beginning? Have ye not understood from the foundations of the earth? It is he that sitteth upon the circle of the earth, and the inhabitants thereof are as grasshoppers, that stretcheth out the heavens as a curtain, and spreadeth them out as a tent to dwell in, that bringeth the princes to nothing, that maketh the judges of the earth as vanity. They shall not be planted, yea, they shall not be sown. Their stalk shall not take root in the earth, they shall not. And he shall also blow upon them, and they shall wither, and the whirlwind shall take them away as stubble. To whom then will ye liken me, or shall I be equal, saith the Holy One? Lift up your eyes on high, and behold, who created these things, that bringeth out their host by number? He calleth them all by names by the greatness of his might, for that he is strong in power, not one faileth. Why sayest thou, O Jacob, and speakest, O Israel, my way is hid from the Lord, and my judgment is passed over from my God? So he says here, do you think anybody is like me? Who are you going to liken God to? Certainly not Ashur, certainly not idols. What likeness will ye compare unto him? And so he kind of sits here and starts making fun of idolatry. The workman melteth a graven image, and the goldsmith spreadeth it over with gold, and casteth silver chains. So he's talking about what they used to do with these idols. They would get these wooden idols that they would carve, and then they would cover it over with gold. So melteth a graven image could be that he's molding a graven image out of perhaps clay, or even maybe some kind of less precious metal, and then the goldsmith spreading it over with gold. That's the idea. So the workman's making this graven image, the goldsmith spreads it over with gold, and makes silver chains for it to wear, presumably around its neck. They actually used to make little clothes for these idols. He that's so impoverished that he hath no oblation chooseth a tree that will not rot. He seeketh unto him a cunning workman to prepare a graven image that shall not be moved. So even somebody that's so poor that he couldn't even offer to the god still decides he's going to make one at least just from a little bit of wood that isn't going to go bad. He gets a workman to make it for him so that it'll last forever. This kind of ridiculous image of somebody who's so poor he can't even make an offering to it, but he still has this little idol in his house. Have ye not known? Have ye not heard? Hath it not been told you from the beginning? Have ye not understood from the foundations of the earth? So it's kind of ironic that it shall be not moved. This nice tree that will not rot is making this idol that's never going to go bad, in other words. And he says, are you kidding? You here are so poor, you don't even have enough to make an offering, yet you're making a god. But that's not really the way it works. It works the other way around. God made the world. The real God made the world. So that's why he is just kind of amazed here. Haven't you known this? Haven't you always known this? Even from the beginning of the nation of Israel, you should have known that Jehovah was the one you were supposed to worship. You're supposed to know this from the foundations of the earth. It is he that sitteth upon the circle of the earth. He's the one that made it. So understood from the foundations of the earth. It is he that sitteth upon the circle of the earth, and the inhabitants thereof are as grasshoppers, that stretcheth out the heavens as a curtain, that spreadeth them out as a tent to dwell in. God encompasses the entire earth. The inhabitants are like grasshoppers to him. They're just like insignificant insects compared to his grandeur. He stretched out the heavens like somebody stretches out a curtain in their own house. He spreads them out as a tent to dwell in. He created the earth like someone sets up a tent to live in. He sets it up for his people so that they could live in it. He says, that bringeth the princes to nothing, that maketh the judges of the earth as vanity. All of these great pompous men that think they're so amazing are insignificant compared to God. Yea, they shall not be planted, yea, they shall not be sown, yea, their stock shall not take root in the earth. And he shall also blow upon them, and they shall wither, and the whirlwind shall take them away as stubble. He says, they're not going to last. The vain men of the earth, the people, in other words, that are using their significant funds to create armies to come attack you right now, the Assyrians, these people are going to be worthless. Is this also a little bit of a dig at the upper class in Judah that hasn't been supporting the poor and is now presumably being punished for their sins? Yeah, probably. He says, these people are not going to be planted, yea, they shall not even be sown. Their stock shall not take root in the earth. In other words, they're not going to be reestablished again. This was the image used to talk about Israel being reestablished on the land, Judah going out and replanting themselves, as it were, and growing upwards again, resettling Judah. It says, it's not going to happen like that for these people. He shall blow upon them, and they shall wither, and the whirlwind shall take them away as stubble. This returns to the image he was talking about at the beginning, that the wicked are like grass, and they're going to get blown away. To whom then will ye liken me, or shall I be equal, saith the Holy One? Once again, certainly not Ashur. Lift up your eyes on high, and behold, who hath created these things, that bringeth out their host by number? He calleth them by names, by the greatness of his might, for that he is strong in power, not one faileth. It says, look up on high, presumably at the stars. Behold, who hath created these things, the heavens, that bringeth out their host by number? You have to remember that at this point they saw these stars as being one giant army for Jehovah. And he says, these guys are going to come fight for me now. He calleth them all by names, by the greatness of his might. Now, at this point in the ancient Near East, in Egypt, but also possibly also in Judah, there was this idea that if you knew somebody's name, real name, you had power to control them. You could curse them or even bless them. But the only way you could do that is if you knew their real name. So he knows all their names, and he can call upon them to do his bidding, and which is, at this point is to go fight the Assyrians. For that he is strong in power, not one faileth. They're all going to do exactly what he tells them to do. Why sayest thou, O Jacob, and speakest, O Israel? My way is hid from the Lord, and my judgment is passed over from my God. It says, you guys think Jacob and Israel, that's just really parallelism talking about Israel and Judah, talking everybody really. It says, so why do you guys think my way is hid from the Lord, and my judgment is passed over from my God? That what I'm doing, God isn't going to know about. You think God is going to let you off scot-free for all the things that you've done. And he says, no. God is the God of armies. He's the one that is in charge of the hosts of heaven. If you guys don't repent, he's going to come down on you just like he's come down on the Assyrians. Which actually really happens, right? Presumably that sickness took out some of the people in Judah, just like it took out the Assyrians. What Isaiah had been telling them all along really did happen just like he said it would, didn't it? I think this is one of his final warnings right here before that happens. Hast thou not known? Hast thou not heard that the everlasting God, the Lord, the creator of the ends of the earth, fainteth not, neither is weary? There is no searching of his understanding. He giveth power to the faint. To them that hath no might he increaseth strength. Even the youth shall faint and be weary, and the young men shall utterly fall. But they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. So he says, didn't you know this? That me, the everlasting God, the Lord, the creator of the ends of the earth, I'm the one that made everything. I don't get tired. I don't faint. I don't need to take a nap. I know everything. There's no searching of his understanding. No mortal can even comprehend what God knows. He knows everything. And he never gets tired. He giveth power to the faint. To them that hath no might, he increaseth strength. So you guys, I know you guys are feeling very weak right now. It's just Jerusalem left against the entire Assyrian army. I'm giving power to you. You guys are going to be just fine. I'm going to increase your strength. Even the youths shall faint and be weary, and the young men shall utterly fall, presumably those in the army outside. They're going to utterly fall. They're going to faint and be weary, because you have these young men in the army going to attack Jerusalem. And they do indeed fall. They get sick. They can't fight anymore. But they that wait upon the Lord, that trust in the Lord, shall renew their strength. Even those in the city, they're under the siege, and God says, you will be strong. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. It'll be as though they had wings of eagles, one of the strongest beings in the area, and this kind of amazing ability to fly that he's talking about. But the idea is that they will have this amazing capacity to resist the Assyrians because God is going to support them. They shall run and not be weary, and shall walk and not faint. And I might say not be faint. It's a parallel. Though they will run and not be tired, they'll walk and not be tired. So I think that's the idea here that we're getting at the end of this chapter. But the message here is amazing. When you look at it in connection with 34 and 35, he's going to continue through 41 and the beginning of 42, that they need to just have faith, and God is going to save them. The powerful are going to be brought low, the weak are going to be brought up. This is the realization of everything Isaiah has been talking about. Yes, it seemed like this was going to be kind of the end of the world stuff. Well, it's not just at the end of the world that's happening. It's going to happen right before their eyes. So we saw it in the last chapter, but he's saying exactly what's going to happen when the Assyrians come to town. He says there's going to be this sacred path. People are going to walk back along it. Refugees are going to come back from being slaves in Assyria, and God is going to go along that path to go out and wipe out the god Ashur, and the Assyrians are just going to crumble. Why? Because he's the best. And we can't avoid it. We have to talk about Zoroastrianism pretty soon here. This chapter brings up a couple of Zoroastrian motifs. He's going to continue to talk about that stuff. He has been talking about it already, actually, so we are going to have to talk about it pretty soon. But you can see in this chapter that he's the creator. Now, this is an idea that they have had for a long time, but it's brought up again in a stronger way in this part of Isaiah. It's a little bit complicated. I'll explain it when I talk about Zoroastrianism, but this is something that's being pushed here as a reminder that Jehovah is better than Ashur. Jehovah is a global deity. He's not a regional deity. He made the whole world, and that gives him power over Ashur. He's not Ashur's equal. He's better. And I think today we don't have problems with this. We're not worried about other deities being better than Jehovah. But we all, I think, want this strength from the Lord that we see here in this chapter. He's talking about even the toughest in the army are going to fall, but even the weakest that wait upon the Lord will renew their strength. And I think that's a beautiful, beautiful idea. No matter how bad things seem, no matter how weak we seem, if we wait on the Lord, He will allow us to mount up with wings as eagles. And that's exactly what comes to pass here, and I think that's exactly what comes to pass for us when we actually take God at His word. So anyway, I hope that made some sense. I wanted to give you some continuity for the entire speech starting in 34. I know we've taken a small break from this speech, but now we'll be back to it into 41 and 42, talking a little bit about it later, a little bit more about it. So we will see you guys next time.